These were just group games, but if you finish the group at the first level, you're higher seeded. So eventually, the final probably is going to be between these two teams, but we will see. Yeah, they're going to play Sweden in the next round, which means we're going to demolish them. Alright. On the analysis tab, you can get an idea about what these analysts are expecting for earnings. For example, analysts expect uh, the earnings per share this year to be 571, next year to be 677. This is for Delta compared to about 616 last year. So there is some growth expectation, but it's not too much for Delta. Let's check the same number for Southwest. They are expecting really big growth next year. That kind of tells you where that number is coming from. And right now, we already have the first 9 months, next quarter, and we know when they're going to end. Also, there are estimates for the growth. I mean, you pretty much see the expected growth rates for next year. Last year, until last year's spring semester, this page also had estimates of 5-year average growth estimate. Unfortunately, we don't have that anymore, but we get that number from something else. There is another number called PEG ratio. This is the PE ratio divided by average 5-year growth rate. This is not necessarily my favorite source of adjustment for growth, but it's easily available. Again, just like the PE ratio, you want this number to be low. So for Delta and Southwest, I don't know whether Yahoo Finance is using the trailing PE or forward PE to calculate this. They're not clear about it. But when you do this for a living, obviously, you should be using forward. If you go back to statistics, the PEG ratio is 0.23 for Southwest. And for Delta, 39.29. Which means you don't expect much growth. Suddenly, once we made the corrections for forward-looking and growth differentials, Southwest seems to be a lot better investment. You probably didn't even uh, think about that anyway. But whenever you make investment decisions like these, you gotta have these backed by numbers. I have different, when I do this for a living, I have a different way of doing it. I'm not going to cover it in this class, it's too advanced. I calculate something called growth adjusted PE ratio. I basically estimate growth rates for the next 5 years, then do some sort of terminal growth rate, then calculate how long it would take me to recover my investment based on those. But PEG ratio is kind of a first approximation. And when the difference is this big, you don't have to fine tune it too much. Apparently, last year there was something special going on with Southwest, so trailing numbers were giving you really bad indications. I don't think your book talks about this, but I want you to know about it anyway. There's a little guy, little known name called Schiller. He just happens to have a Nobel Prize in economics. He says P ratio is backward looking, plus it only looks at last 12 months. As I said, you know, especially with accounting earning numbers, you could have a lot of big fluctuations. This guy says, instead of doing that, let's do this. This is sometimes known as cyclic or CAPE. It's also colloquially known as Schiller PE ratio. He basically says, do the following. Take the price divided by E bar or EPS bar, where EPS bar is where E tilde inflation adjusted EPS in the past. So go to earnings 10 years ago, adjust that for inflation so that you bring it to today's dollars. Do this for all of them, take an average of them. The reason he picked 10, historically speaking at least, the length of a business cycle is about 10 years. There's a natural cycle to business. You have high growth periods and you have slow growth periods, so on and so forth. I'm not necessarily too much in favor of using this for the purposes of individual stocks, but it actually gives you a good idea about overall stock market. For example, current S&P 500 PE is about 30, and CAPE is 3850. This is also a little bit backward looking, but sometimes based on this, you could make a decision on whether the market is expensive or not. Again, I'm going to talk about this more when we're doing cost of capital and stuff.